Hi guys, it's the first ever episode 0 of Dawson's Crack, the Dawson's Creek episode rewatch, first time watch through because I didn't make it all the way through the first time, podcast, okay? And we're going to be breaking it down episode by episode. We're going to try to make it through the entire season or until our eyes start bleeding, okay? First episode, we're going to do the pilot episode. This is episode 0 of Dawson's Crack. And first, we're going to read off the summary of the first initial episode coming from televisionofyour.com because it was the funniest one. We're going to move the camera a little bit. And it goes as follows. Dawson is smitten by his new neighbor, Jen. Pacey is attracted to his middle-aged English teacher. And Joey scowls at everyone about everything. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to be opening. First off, Joey and Dawson are in the bed. They're watching E.T. on the TV. She repeats a line from the E.T. and then asks Dawson if it won the Oscar. He responds with, nope, Gandhi won the Oscar. Spielberg was robbed, and this is before he outgrew his Peter Pan syndrome. Okay, throwing shade at Gandhi, kind of funny. Joey says, Gandhi, why give an Oscar to a movie you can't even sit through? Now, I'm guessing she's making this reference because it's 3.5 hours long. Gandhi, of course, didn't age well because it's got Ben Kingsley as Gandhi, who, though half Indian, is doing brownface. It did win 8 Oscars, though, so it's like E.T. versus 8 Oscars. Who's really winning that? I don't know. It is what it is. So we're moving on. They're looking at each other. She's getting ready to put her shoes on and leave. Dawson wants to know where she's going. And he says, why don't you just spend the night? She says, I don't think that's a good idea anymore. And Dawson responds, you've been staying every night since you were 7. And it's a Saturday night. And she says, well, we start high school. She's putting on her jacket. And this is when the big reveal happens where she says, I don't think it's okay for us to sleep in the same bed anymore because it was okay when we were kids, but now we're 15. So you get the big reveal that they're 15 and that they start high school on Monday. Dawson doesn't seem to understand what's going on. She says, I have breasts now. And then she looks at Dawson and says, and you have genitals. Genitals? What are we doing? Next thing you know, he says, well, I've always had genitals. And she says, yeah, but you have more of them. He asks her how she knows. And she says, long fingers. Long fingers? As a what? As a reference to his junk, long fingers? That's weird, awkward, uncomfortable. I don't like it. Dawson responds with, don't hit and run, and tells her to stay. She says that I just think our emerging hormones are destined to alter our relationship, and I'm trying to limit the fallout. So I'm guessing that's a little foreshadowing, given their relationship now, emerging hormones. Dawson says, your emerging hormones aren't developing a thing for me, are they? Which I'm assuming, and again, is foreshadowing. She seems to be obtuse to the concept, and she says, no, I'm not getting a thing for you, Dawson. I've known you too long. I've seen you burp, barf, pick your nose, scratch your butt, and I don't think I'm getting a thing for you. That's a weird grouping of things, but it's okay. Dawson continues to not understand, and she says, we're changing and we have to adjust to the whole male-female thing. He says, what's with this when Harry meets 80s crap? It doesn't apply to us. We transcend that. Yet again, they're supposed to be 15. This dialogue is crazy for 15-year-olds. They're way too adult-sounding. Also, James Van Der Beek looks ridiculously old compared to a theoretical 15-year-old high school student, but she looks a little more age appropriate, but not really. This is, of course, pre-Scientology, pre-Tom Cruise, so it's difficult to say. She's obviously played teenagers before, so it's not that unrealistic to think that Katie Holmes is closer to the correct age, but Dawson looks nothing at all like a 15-year-old. I know this is a Kevin Williamson production. Kevin Williamson notorious for putting full-grown adult males and females into high school settings a la Scream. So this is 98. Prior to this, he did Scream in 96. He's also known for Vampire Diaries, a whole bunch of other Scream movies, a bunch of other TV shows. So we got some Kevin Williamson flair on this one already. Also, the insanely overdone dialogue. Joey's sure they're going to avoid this. And Dawson says, proof will remain that we'll remain friends despite mounting sexual theatrics. That's another funny thing to hear a 15-year-old say. I'm sure that's going to be a huge theme in this. And then he also says, come on, don't get female on me, Joey. I don't want to have to start calling you Josephine, completely denying her female agency and pretending like he's never perceived her as a female. That's when she gives in. She comes over and she basically jumps in the bed with him. They start wrestling, and then you end up with the slow pan of Joey laying in bed on the rim of the bed, Dawson taking up basically the whole fucking bed. So he's got like 80% of the bed. She's got the rim. We do the slow pan up. She looks awkward. He seems to not even understand that anything's changed. Now we're going to hit the opening credits. Of course, depending on which version you watch, depends on the song. There's apparently 2 different versions. So the traditional version, of course, is I Don't Want to Wait. Right. And so if you're watching it on Tubi, that's going to be the song. If you remember it back in the day, that's going to be the song. Unfortunately, if you watch it on Netflix or anywhere else, you're going to get a completely different song. And the other song is going to be Run Like Mad, which is basically on all the DVDs, and it's also on the Netflix. Now, it was supposed to be the original song it was actually written for the show, but apparently they used I Don't Want to Wait in a variety of promotional materials when it was on the WB, and that stuck. And then there is a huge story about how it got changed. Maybe we'll go into it on a bonus. But yeah, so we hit that first song. Hopefully you're watching it on the I Don't Want to Wait, because it's a much better version. Okay, so after the opening song, we get our next scene. We're at the boat dock. Joey's sitting in a lawn chair, camera's moving around, and the next thing you know, they crash into the water. Dawson screams cut, and this is when you discover that he's trying to make a monster movie. Now, my problem with this issue, it's my own issue, but it's ridiculous in my opinion, because if you look at the camera equipment he has, it's very advanced. He's using like a weird crane apparatus. They're supposed to be 15. How did they get there? How did they pack all that stuff in? They would have to like backpack it in or take a cab or something. You do know there's cabs in this town, so it's possible, but it just seems like one of those things where it's like he's got too much stuff there. Unless each one of them took a piece, it's also really expensive looking stuff. And for him to be 15 and coming out of the water, of course, you have a monster. He grabs Joey, throws Joey in the water, and that's when you discover inside the monster costume is the reveal of Pacey. Now, also, the monster costume he's using kind of looks like a Swamp Thing costume. It actually looks like a pretty good costume. It's probably not cheap. He probably bought it with his video store money. You'll find out later where he works. So my guess is that's where all the stuff comes from, but it's hard to say. Obviously, when I was a kid, I made movies, so I get it. But still, Joey is really mad at Pacey and says, "You did it again. You grabbed my ass," claiming that he's grabbing her ass every single take. She's super pissed off. Pacey responds to, "Like you even have one." So Pacey's, of course, being a dick here, but it seems like a theme with him. We'll see if it pops up again. And this is when you find out big scheduling issue and that he has 2 weeks to get his movie done and in a film festival. Okay. There's another little bit of funky dialogue here where Pacey says, "Hey, it's Meryl Streep's fault, okay? I'm doing my best," because, you know, they're trying to get everything done. And that's when a taxi cab pulls up, a girl comes out. Now you'll discover that this person is Jen, a la Dawson's new neighbor. She's wearing a very 1998, 2001 sundress. The cab is a little weird because it's a station wagon. I just think that's a funny detail. And that's when you discover that Jen is in town and hasn't seen Dawson in a long time, discovering that, you know, he looks completely different now. And then he says, "Oh, you're the neighbor person." How, you know, they talk about why she's in town, and she says, "I'm here to help my grandfather," right? Her exact words, though, are, "My grandfather's aorta collapsed and they have to replace it with a plastic tube. So my parents sent me to help for a while." Aorta collapsed? That seems like a funny way to say that. Why wouldn't you say, like, you're having a heart attack? You could say anything else. She says aorta collapsed? That's intense. Then you find out they're going to 10th grade. Obviously, we already kind of knew that because Joey mentions that they're starting high school. But basically, we've established every character in this show is somewhere around 15, also in 10th grade, theoretically. Jen looks a little more age appropriate, not quite as old as Dawson, right around the same age as Joey. So both of those are kind of a fitting character, but it's difficult to say. However, Dawson clearly doesn't look anywhere near the appropriate age. Pacey's a little close, but not that far off. So now Pacey shows his true colors in this case. He asks Dawson, "You think she's a virgin?" And then asks her, "If you want to nail her?" Dawson's response, of course, is, "We just met." And he says, "Wasted moment it was. I mean, greater men would have nailed her right now. You know what I mean, Dawson?" Dawson's pissed off at him and says, tack to look it up. As they walk in, they discover a bunch of noise, breaking glass, so on and so forth, and you see Mr. and Mrs. Leary, a la Dawson's parents, on the table fooling around. Dawson's horrified. A little callback from earlier that I forgot was that while Joey and Dawson are both watching TV, he clips over to the news and he discovers a woman on the news, starts talking about her hairdo, and that's when you discover that woman is in fact Dawson's mom. She works as a news anchor. Now Pacey responds to the hair again and he says, "Oh, your hair looks really nice." Another callback to the beginning. Now we see Joey come in rowing her boat. It seems like she rows a boat all over the place. For some reason, my guess is because where this is supposed to be shot is a fictitious New England town called Capeside, Massachusetts. And a la the creek she's going in is probably, a reference to Dawson's Creek because, she's traveling through the creek. My assumption would be that. And at this point, she starts talking to a dude who asks her to taste something. She responds with orgasmic, which is just kind of uncomfortable because she's talking to a theoretical adult male and she says orgasmic. That's when you discover this dude is her sister's boyfriend. Okay, her sister's very, very pregnant. They have a little exchange. She yells at Joey saying that she's too pregnant to mess around with trying to find things under the bed. Joey tells her to stay out of your room. It establishes a parent-sister dynamic situation there. And that's when you meet all of those people and realize that Joey lives with her sister. Next scene, we cut to the storefront of a video rental store. We see a big sign that says Screenplay Video, movie rentals, new releases, and more. And you realize that Dawson and Pacey are both working at said video store. Pacey says a snide comment about Mr. Leary and Mrs. Leary messing around on the table. Mrs. Leary had called her husband Mr. Man-Meat. Pacey attacks Dawson and says, in a, choking manner, but also just establishing Pacey obviously is not a nice guy. He says, "So if your dad's Mr. Man-Meat, does that make you Mr. Man-Meat Jr. or Mr. Man-Meat II?" Totally understandable for two 15-year-olds to be giving each other some shit. Dawson says, "Don't make me have to drag the creek for your body." And that's when a blonde girl shows up in a halter top and she says, "Does Forrest Gump go in the comedy or the drama section?" Now, we're about to establish a little rapport with her and who she is. Pacey responds to the girl kind of snarkily and says, "How many times are you going to ask that?" Dawson, of course, answers the question legitimately and says, "It goes in the drama section." Now, arguably, I could say Forrest Gump goes in the comedy section because it's hilarious. A lot of people still like that movie. And that's when Pacey insults the girl, calling her wet-brained, which I think is like a mean, under his breath, he calls her wet-brained. A little bit of a mean, snarky comment there. The girl whips around and attacks. And she says, "I'm sorry, what did you say? Did you just toss a negative, disparaging remark my way? Because if you did, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'd like to remind you who you are." Pacey responds with, I know, your dad owns the place." So now we've established whoever this girl is. Her dad owns the video store that they work at. And she responds even more harshly and says, "No, I'm talking about in the huge rotating world of life." Pacey says, "And who am I, Nellie?" So now we know this is Nellie. And she says, "Nobody. That's the point. You're not there. You don't even exist. Because if you did, I might have to respond to your pathetic little under-the-breath one-liners. But I take comfort in knowing you're vapor." Poof. And then she waves her hands and pushes him off. So then she turns around and says, "Non-existent. You're nothing." Just then, a more adult woman walks in, and Pacey is super, bonerific about this chick. And he says, "Oh my God, look at her." Dawson tries to shut it down and says, "Have some respect, man. She's somebody's mother." Pacey's response to this is, "I have it on pretty good authority that moms have excellent sex lives, all right?" That's when Dawson cuts him off and basically tries to help the customer. Says, "Can we help you?" And you find out her name is Tamara. And she's looking for a specific movie. There's a little back and forth between her and Pacey. He says, "Can I help you locate a movie?" She says, "Maybe I'm in the mood for romance." He tries to point her to the new releases, and she says, No, I'm vintage all the way. "Where can I find The Graduate?" A la the Graduate. Graduate, obviously. She then specifies, The Graduate, where the older woman, Anne Bancroft, seduces the younger man, Dustin Hoffman. Pacey's kind of taken aback, and he says, "I'll check for it." Dawson immediately grabs the tape, It's right here. Hands it to her. Pay, he says, pay when you drop it off. Now, here's a little stylistic thing that I think is a little bit funny. Now, anybody who remembers video stores remembers that, like, when you rent a video, what should have happened was her bring the box up to him take the box, then file it, and hand her, like, the plastic container with the tape in it, because when you're out on the floor, they have the picture boxes so that you can read the back and the synopsis and look at the artwork. And then, of course, you hand it to the clerk. He hands you back the blank cassette tape in the plastic container. So theoretically, she just asked for the tape. He gave it to her. He never recovered the box from out on the floor. So somewhere in there, the box is still loose, just living its life out there. Someone could easily try to re-rent it. It's not really a deal breaker by any means. It's just like a weird stylistic thing that I think, you know, I know they did it for plot reasons, because otherwise you'd have to go through the whole exchange where she goes and gets the video and then brings it back and stuff. So for time, you don't really need it, but it's also one of those situations where it just takes me out of it for just a sec. So they have a little more repertoire between Dawson and Pacey, and basically he says she's flirting with him. He says no, she's interested in Dustin Hoffman. She doesn't want anything to do with you. We cut to the next scene. Next scene, we get our first music cue, second to the opener. And it's Jen sitting on a dock, and we get the song As I Lay Me Down by Sophie B. Hawkins playing in the background. Dawson walks up. He's got his little videotapes in his hand. Something I think is funny, and I think it's probably going to play out later. Take a note of the fact that every time you see Dawson with videotapes, it seems like he has 3 videotapes in his hand. I'm going to see if this is a theme throughout, but my theory is that we're going to see this over and over again, because back in the day when you used to rent videos at video stores, they used to always do the 3 for 3. So it was $3 to rent 3 tapes. So I think after this, I bet you every time you see Dawson, he's going to have at least 3 videos in his hand. That's my theory. I can't guarantee it, but we'll find out. This is when Dawson walks over to Jen. They start talking about, how's your grandfather doing? A la, because he's aorta collapsed. She says, he's still breathing, which is a good sign. And then she says, my problem is actually the challenge with my grandmother. She has, and her exact words are, she has this praying mentality, which is really awkward since I don't do the whole God thing. So now we know Jen's an atheist, and she's going to have a problem with her grandmother, a la her grandmother's probably religious, and she's going to have a struggle with this. She then takes the tapes out of Dawson's hand to see what they are. You find out it's Black Lagoon, Humanoid, and Swamp Thing. He tells her how he's going to make a movie, and he's currently making a monster movie. She calls him ambitious, and he tells her yet again Steven Spielberg trivia that he's 15 and Steven Spielberg started on 8mm when he was 13, so he's actually behind. And then he asked her if she wants to come over and see his studio, a la his bedroom. So we go over to the long shot. We go to his bedroom. His bedroom is just coated in fucking movie posters everywhere. And Jen takes a look around and says, I'm going to take a long shot that you're a Steven Spielberg fan, a la, because the tapes are, you know, the videos, the whole wall is covered in various movie posters and horse shit related to that. And he responds with, I have them career chronicled up on my wall. If you notice, everything is arranged in receding box office order, starting with blockbusters, Jurassic Park, E.T., Jaws, Indiana Jones, and you'll follow me over to the critically acclaimed wall. And then as we walk to the other side, we see a poster. He says Schindler's List in the color purple. Now, this is weird to me because, okay, he's supposed to be 15. He could easily have seen either one of these movies, no question. Schindler's List was out. Kids watch Schindler's List. It's just a little adult for a 15-year-old. Color purple makes no sense. He could have watched it. It's possible. He does work at the video store. You could literally watch anything, but that's, of course, the Oprah Woman of Color film. It would not be super appealing to him, especially since he's into, like, monster movies and E.T. and dumb shit. It's a little too advanced for him. And that's when he opens the door and he shows, the last of the receding box office videos is a la 1941 and the movie Always. Now, why is this weird? Okay, 1941 I could probably understand. It is technically a comedy. It's kind of like a World War II spoof film with John Belushi in it, and it is sort of kind of like an airplane-y vibe, okay? But the movie Always, all of these movies, Gandhi, 1941, all of these movies, it seems to be that he has a weird fetish for, like, 80s movies, right? And it's supposed to be, they're supposed to be, at this point, they're supposed to be in, like, 98, maybe, 96, depending, because a la Scream is 96. The show comes out in 98, so you'd assume it's a relevant, like, current show and current timeline, maybe not, but hard to say. Basically, it's a weird movie about an aerial firefighter and the synopsis is, risks himself in his vintage World War II airplane in constant death-defying quests to fight forest fires. There's also this weird element where the dead World War II pilot comes back to like mentor his new protege. It's just a weird movie. It's kind of got a fantasy element. I guess it is technically PG-13. He could have easily watched it, but it was not a huge success. I think Richard Dreyfuss is in it. I'm not really sure, but it just seems like a weird movie to have a poster of. And yet again, where did he get the poster? I guess he has to get it from his video store job. It's hard to say because obviously they used to sell those, like the extra movie posters. So maybe that's where he got it. That's when Jen asked him if he was familiar with obsessive reality disorder. Dawson responds with, "It's beyond that. See, I believe that all of our mysteries of the universe, of all of life's questions, can be found in Steven Spielberg movies. It's a theory I've been working on. You see, whenever I have a problem, all I have to do is look to the right Steven Spielberg film, and the answer reveals itself." Jen says, "Have you ever considered a 12-step program?" All of this dialogue does not make any sense for their age yet again. I'm sure it's going to be a theme through this whole thing. That's when you find out he's trying to get into this Boston Film Critics program for junior filmmakers. The deadline's in 2 months, and that's, of course, probably why he's trying to get his film done, and he keeps talking about this monster movie. This is when you see Joey coming up the ladder. Of course, Joey comes in and out of the ladder, a la Billy from Scream, and I'm assuming it's another Kevin Williamson thing, but you see her coming up. She hears Jen's voice. She immediately doesn't come in, and she just holds tight against the house so that they don't hear her come in. And that's when Jen has to leave because she doesn't want to anger her grandmother. Joey finally comes through the window. Dawson's excited to see her. And he does this very bizarre thing, in my opinion, where he has her sit down. You think they're going to watch another movie maybe. And he shows her on the TV. He says, "Joey, where have you been? Hey, can you watch this?" He turns on the show, and it's his mom in a newscast, right? And what makes this one weird is, I'll explain it in just a sec, but basically Mrs. Leary's on the TV. She says a phone number, and then she says, "Back to you, Bob." That's when Dawson asks Joey, "Do you think she's sleeping with her co-anchor?" Joey's flabbergasted and says, "Where does that come from?" And he says, "Something about her bees. They're too soft. Back to you, Bob." Joey responds with, "You're reaching. I mean, why would your mom be sleeping with her co-anchor? Your dad's the perfect male specimen." Yet again, perfect male specimen. He's man meat. He's perfect male specimen. They're always talking about how great he is. That's super weird. Also, what makes this logistically strange is this is the VHS time, right? So for him to be watching this and rewinding it on the TV, we don't have TiVo or streaming, right? So he physically has to record her newscast and then keep the tape, and he's watching the tape. So either he records all her newscasts, right, and he just rewatches them for fun, or he happened to catch this one at a perfect moment, because basically there's no other way he could have that on tape. It would have to be coincidence, or he has to record all her stuff, or there's really just no way he should have that. And it just seems weird that he would continuously record it. And also, based on the body language, how did he make those connections? It seems like an odd loop for him to give a shit about. It's just weird. Dawson's sure of it, but Joey says, "You're just looking for conflict. Everything's a potential script for you, except your perfect life, Dawson. It's reality." But it's like, okay, he's writing a bunch of scripts. He's only working on one monster movie, and as far as I can tell, they're not on book. I mean, they're just making it up as they go. So he's just making all these scripts, I guess. So in the future, I guess maybe he's making scripts. I don't know. It just seems like a funny line. Then we cut to Jen with her grandfather. So it opens up with Jen with her grandfather. She puts her hand on his chest, on his zipper scar. It looks pretty realistic. However, he looks like he's in a friggin' coma. I get the sense that, they got a guy who actually had a bypass scar. But the thing is, like, the scar is too well defined, as in it's already healed. Okay, so he's supposed to have just had his aorta collapse, quote unquote, and now it's already healed. I think they went a little too far with that, but I guess they didn't want it too grim because it's on network TV. So my guess that's why they picked a dude who already had the zipper. I don't know, but it did look like a pretty good scar. I'm assuming the dude actually had a bypass, but the dude is like in a coma. She's touching him, he's not moving. I'm like, dude, I think he should be in a facility, because I don't think you can just regularly take care of him in that state of things. It cuts to Grandma making scrambled eggs, and she goes to give it to Jen. Jen, of course, responds with, I don't usually eat in the morning, Grams. I really appreciate the thought and all, but my eyes are barely propped open by noon. Just a cup of coffee will fix me. And she pours herself a cup of coffee. Graham, of course, says she'll remember that in the future, being kind of respectful in this case. Jen asks about Dawson next door. The grandmother says Joey's been crawling in her window for 10 years. Now, this is kind of silly, and then she also says neither one of them goes to church, right? Well, this is kind of a little logistics issue that I have here. She says she's been crawling in her window for 10 years. Okay, Dawson says she's been staying at his house since she was 7. That would make 10 years she's crawling in his window at 5. Even at 7, that's a little unbelievable. At 5, that's super unbelievable. So she probably could have said crawling in his house for 8 years. It would have made more sense if she was 17 and she's been crawling in his window for 10 years and staying since she was 7, not 15. And I think a lot of things would be fixed if you made them all 17 or 16. It would make more sense. But obviously the reason they probably didn't do that is because how are you going to get 6 seasons out of that? Because they would already be too old. The show's probably going to end while they're in college. I can't say for sure, but that's my guess. That's my theory on why they didn't do that. Now, Graham tries to say grace, and that's when you discover Jen refuses to say grace. Grandmother confronts her about it and says, is there a reason you don't want to do it? And she says, Graham, I really don't want to get into this, kind of cause a headache, but I don't really do well with church and Bible and this prayer stuff. Grandma, of course, is offended by this, and she says, I don't covet a religious God, Graham. I'm an atheist. I don't covet a religious God? That's a crazy statement. Next thing you know, you see Nell again, a la the girl from the video store. She introduces herself as Nellie, and she says Nellie is in Little House, like Little House on the Prairie. Nellie responds with, I know, Little House on the Prairie, it was my mom and dad's favorite show, but no preconceived notions. I'm not at all like her. That's when she asks if she parties. She says, your grandfather's on our prayer list. And she says, party a la drugs and drinking. And Nellie's response is, it's objective. Okay, so she doesn't say, yeah, we do drugs. She doesn't say, yeah, we're drinking. She just says, it's objective. That's kind of a weird sentence. And that's when Jen says, no, I'm substance free. So Jen's straight edge. There's also a little bit of, something going on there. Dawson walks up. Jen says, I could really use a cigarette. And he says, oh, you smoke? And she says, no, I've quit. She's 15. She already quit smoking. Maybe, but that seems weird. They have a little back and forth about Dawson's schedule, which comes up later. And then we go to Tub Thumpin', which I forgot that song even exists. So to hear Chumbawamba again is pretty hilarious. Then we have Pacey showing up. He sees through the door Tamara from the video store is there. He introduces himself and says, Tamara, and she says that's Miss Jacobs to you during school hours, establishing that she doesn't want to be called Tamara in school, obviously, and trying to set up boundaries, which I'm sure Pacey's going to blow right through. And that's when you see Dawson shows up in a classroom. Psycho's playing on the TV, and he points it out. The teacher says, oh, you're into the film? And he says, Anthony Perkins, Janet Leigh, Universal, 1960. Little known fact, did you know Hitchcock surprised Janet Leigh with freezing cold water in order to get that scream effect so effectively? Mr. Gold's a little bit impressed, wants to know who he is. He says, oh, you must be in my film class. And he said, that's the problem. My schedule denied it. And he says, oh, that must mean you must be a sophomore. And that's when you find out only upperclassmen are allowed to take the film class. And Dawson's clearly mad about it. He says he has a passion for filmmaking. He says, it's my life's ambition. How many students in your class do you have that? There's not a lot of opportunities in such a small town, Mr. Gold, and I really want this opportunity. You should just override your bizarre rule. And that's when Mr. Gold puts his foot down and says, the class is maxed out. No exceptions. It wouldn't be fair. It'd be problematic if I let you in. And he just shuts him down and says, no, period, complete sentence. You cannot have the class. Mr. Gold, a little over the top, dude. You could just be like, sorry, bro. You got time. We'll do it another time. Also, Dawson, it's like, dude, you're 15. One, you're already going to a film festival. You're already looking to get into a film program in Boston. Why do you need Mr. Gold's class? Like, you're already making moves. You don't really need that class. And also, you got time. You're 15. You got more years to come. There's no way you're going directly into filmmaking at that age. So, chill. Mr. Gold, though, you could be a little less of a dick. Just saying. Jen talks to Joey in the hallway and asks if Dawson and her are a thing because you can obviously tell she has feelings. Joey says no. but she definitely gives some tension here. That's when Jen says that her grandmother warned her about Joey, and she says, well, your grandma's cracked, which I think is a funny insult. I think that's hilarious. And she says, why does she rag on you so bad? That's when you find out she said, my dad's in prison. My sister's impregnated by her black boyfriend, which I completely forgot. Interracial couples are a problem at this period of time, I guess. And when you find out what she's in prison, what her father's in prison for, she says conspiracy to traffic marijuana in excess of 10,000 pounds. Now, the thing is with Joey, though, I can't tell if that's true. She's just making it up. Like, maybe the father is in prison. Maybe he's not. Maybe she's just making that shit up just to start crap. You can't really tell with Joey. However, obviously her sister is impregnated by her boyfriend. Him being black doesn't really matter one way or the other to me. And then she says something about her mother, and that's when you find out her mother died of cancer. So now you have that tension between her and Jen. Jen is trying to, continue to be her friend, and she's just not having it at all. Now we're back to Tamara and Pacey again, and Pacey's obviously making things uncomfortable. He calls her Tamara again. She says, Miss Jacobs, and then he asked her how the graduate is. She says, just as I remember. He said, are you looking for romance tonight? Weird statement to say there. She asked him any suggestions, and he says, how about the summer of 42? Okay, so then he describes the summer of 42 where he says, well, it's about a beautiful woman who seduces a young boy on the verge of manhood. Now, the thing is, summer of 42 is kind of like that, but there's also like a tragedy element because I seem to remember like the friend is killed in combat or something. Yet again, it's an 80s movie. I'm really not sure Pacey would have watched that. It's hard to say because you don't really know the vibe with Pacey, but also he does work at the video store, so maybe he just like watches stuff for the sake of watching it. Who knows? But she says, it's a favorite of mine. He says, I'll reserve it for you. And that's when he says, actually, I'm going to the Rialto tonight. So now you know she's going to the movie. She's just going to go see the new movie. She says it's getting great reviews. And he says, I'll have to check back on it. Their exchange is over with. And that's when Pacey pops up and he says, we're going to go stalk a faculty member to Dawson. Stalk a faculty member? Pacey's clearly over the line here. He's already gone too far. He's called her by her first name. He's disrespected her boundaries. And now he's going to go stalk her at the movie theater. So he's going to go stalk his English teacher. Dawson tries to shut him down and says, no, thank you. He says, I actually have the possibility of losing my virginity in a high-level fantasy fashion. Pacey, calm down. Calm down, bro. Dawson tries to shut him down, says, walk your dog. It's not going to happen. Now, what I never realized is we're going to hear that walk your dog phrase later. I thought he literally meant talking about walking his dog. Later on, we'll find out that's actually a euphemism for jerking off. Didn't catch that at all. The first time through or the second time through, never even noticed that. I thought he was literally talking about Pacey going home and walking his dog. But as we'll find out, that's not the case later on. He says, nope. That's not the plan, man. I want to familiarize her with the gaze, the smile, the charm, features, That's a fucking hilarious thing to hear out of a 15-year-old's mouth talking about his current adult English teacher. Way over the line. Yet again, Dawson says, nope, don't think so. He says, look, it is a fact that a large percentage of older women are attracted to young boys on the verge of manhood. Yet again, young boys on the verge of manhood, not okay. And also, not true. He says, it keeps them feeling young. I read it in Cosmopolitan. Dawson's like, why are you reading Cosmo? And he says, I have 3 menstrually diverse sisters. Cosmo is my savior. Menstrually diverse sisters. Whoa. That's a crazy line. Just in general, not even because of their age. It's so much. Then Pacey says, you got to come because I need the moral support. You should invite Miss Teen New York, a la Jen. Now, prior to this, we've discovered that Jen was actually from New York. That's why he mentions that. But also, you can just use her name, dude. You don't have to do that. I know that's your vibe, but it's weird. This is when he sees Jen talking to a dude in a Letterman's jacket, immediately gets like kind of jealous. And Pacey says, unless somebody beats you to it. He tells him, be assertive, read Cosmo, build your female esteem, all lines that are stupid. And this is when he tries to shut Jen down talking to this guy. He says, oh, I've seen you met Roger. Okay, so now we know the football player's name is Roger. And he calls him the jock quarterback by day, schizophrenic transvestite by night. And then he says he's got a Tory spelling complex and he's partial to Victoria's Secret. Weird set of insults there. Jen responds, cleverly by saying, oh, he can run in pumps, which I think is a cute line. That's actually a pretty fun line, and I kind of like it. This is when Joey and Dawson run into each other, and Dawson tries to get her to go to the movies with him. He says Pacey's on a hormonal mission trying to get with his teacher and that he needs Joey to come along so that they can double date. She's not having it at all. And he is like, dude, you got to do me a solid here. And she ends up folding because she can't say no to Dawson, basically. Now we're cutting to the next wave. We're going to call this part 3 of the episode. And we have Jen and Graham again. Jen lets her know that she's going to go to the movies. And Graham is not at all cool with that. She says, what are you up to? And she says, well, I thought Dawson has a gun. I thought we'd go knock over a liquor store, then get tattoos. Of course, the grandma doesn't think that's funny. And she says, I'm simply trying to establish a rapport with you that's based on humor. I'm completely harmless. You'll see. The grandmother doesn't want anything to do with it. And she says, as long as you go to church, you can go to the movies. That's when Jen puts her foot down and says, basically, I'm firm in my beliefs and I don't want anything to do with that. That's when Jen tells her grandmother she'll in fact go to church if she says the word penis. She words it in a hilarious way, though. She says, it's just a word, Grams. Clinical, technical, penis. Of course, the grandmother's not going to say that. She ends up folding and Jen ends up going to the movies anyway. That's when we see Dawson again. He runs into his dad, who's downstairs, and he's playing with a diorama on the table. It's super weird. And he says, the waitresses could wear scuba gear. And the part I'm not getting is, so Dawson says, completely impractical, Dad. This whole aqua-themed restaurant idea gets worse and worse on a daily basis. Now, here's my thing. Is he actually trying to make an aquatic-themed restaurant, right? Or it's just a bit? Did he build that diorama? Is this a prefab action figure? Like, what the hell is going on here? Then you look, and he's watching his mom on the news again. The news is on like all the time, every minute of every day for some reason in this town. Like she's continuously on the TV. So they talk about that a little bit. And then Dawson's dad tries to bring up a sex talk. Dawson's not having it and says condom chat is premature and that he's not into it. And he makes a reference to the fact that Steven Spielberg would never have a sex scene. Now, of course, this is pre-Munich. So Steven Spielberg did have a sex scene, but at the time that was true. Now we're back to Joey with her sister and her boyfriend. We find out his name is Brody, and her sister tries to reach out. Bess tries to reach out to Joey and gives her some lipstick and tries to show her how to use it, trying to give her a little feminine edge. That's when we pop up Jen, Dawson, Joey with Pacey, all headed on their way to the movies. Jen tries to compliment her and says, I love your lipstick. What shade is that? Joey says, wicked red. What's your hair color? What number box is that? She dyes her hair because that used to be an insult back in the day. That's when Dawson cuts her off and says, what are you growing up in a barn? She says, no, I just do highlights. And that's when Joey says, Jen, are you a virgin? Completely inappropriate. Dawson shuts her down, gets mad at her, and she says, Dawson's a virgin. 2 virgins really make for a clumsy first experience, don't you think? So obviously Joey's being catty to Jen for no reason because she has feelings for Dawson and doesn't know how to express herself. Jen takes it on the nose and says, no, I'm a virgin too. How about you? And she says, no, I lost it to a trucker named Bubba. Obviously not true. She's just being a dick, but she obviously is just mad. Now we're at the Rialto. They end up sitting down, and the way they line up, Jen ends up in the middle between Dawson and Joey, we're trying to set a little bit of foreshadowing there. Then we see Pacey go after Tamara in the audience. Now, of course, this is awkward. He's obviously stalking her. He's obviously being a dick. We're going to have a whole exchange with her later. That's when Joey looks over at Jen and she says, are you a size queen? Which is really inappropriate, really over the top. Obviously, Joey's being a dick. And she responds with, being a virgin, how would I know? What about you? And she says, I'm torn. That's when Dawson grabs her, drags her away, and starts bitching her out. And that's when, on the way out, she says, have you noticed his long fingers? Back to the long fingers, cock talk. Weird. Pacey says, hey, Tamara. She's like, what are you doing here? He tells her he's reserved the movie Summer of 42 for her and says, no big deal. That's when her date gets mad. She tells him to go sit with his friends. Her date says, hey, is he bothering you? He gets in the guy's face, and the dude punches him in the face. So now you have a grown-ass man punching a child in the mouth at the movie theater, which I think is kind of well, I guess it's in his eye, but still it's kind of a funny bit because it's like, dude, he would obviously not fight a grown-ass man, but it's still funny because he does. So popcorn goes everywhere, and then you have a back and forth with Joey and Dawson. He's mad at her, obviously, because it's ridiculous. She tells Dawson he's living in a fairyland and he needs to grow up. And then we have Dawson walking Jen home. Dawson tries to go in for the kiss. She's not having it. Dawson calls this a repulsive evening. Jen says, no, it's not your fault. I mean, I know I don't put as much power in the universe, but I feel completely responsible for tonight. Power in the universe? What are we doing here? Then Dawson responds with, I pulled the pin, I tossed the grenade. I got a big old L on my forehead, a la, the L on your forehead loser thing. She says, no, you're not a loser, Dawson. You're very sweet, smart. You have a great sense of humor without being too obnoxious. You're very talented, and also you have clear skin. Now, that being said, Dawson is clearly a moron. He's not at all smart. He's completely obtuse to every social situation. He hasn't said a single joke. Nothing's funny. He's definitely obnoxious. He's not Pacey level obnoxious, but he's definitely obnoxious. Like, that's not at all true. And then he says, he appreciates it. And she says, thank you, Dawson. Things weren't so great for me back in New York. I'm kind of scared right now. And can we just pretend we actually did kiss? So that's kind of cute. Now we cut back to Pacey and Tamara. And this is where shit hits the fan. Okay, so Pacey has overstepped. He's used her first name when he's not supposed to. He's now stalking her at the movie theater. And now he just got punched out by her date. So all Pacey is doing is not okay. Tamara says, are you okay? He says, I'll live. Then they have a little back and forth. And he says, what about The Graduate? What about The Summer of 42? Which would you rather discuss? And she says, this has all been a misunderstanding. I was just trying to rent a movie. He calls her a liar and says that it wasn't just about renting a movie. And then he throws like this completely overblown line at her when she says, the truth is I was just trying to rent a movie. He says, it's a crock. The truth is, you were a well put together knockout of a woman who feels a little insecure about hitting 40. Too much already, bro. So when a young, virile boy such as myself flirts with you, you enjoy it. You entice it. You fantasize about what it would be like to be with a young boy on the verge of manhood. Because it helps you stay feeling attractive. Makes the aging process a little more bearable. Well, let me tell you something. You blew it, lady. I'm the best sex you'll never have. Okay, right off the bat, dude. No, dude, just no on all fronts. You called her old for hitting 40, which is ridiculous. You claim that she just wants to bang you to feel young again and that she fantasizes is about doing young boys. He uses the verge of manhood thing again. Just way overblown. And then on top of that, he says, best sex you'll never have. He's 15. He's a virgin. He doesn't know a fucking thing about anything. That's completely ridiculous. I know he's just trying to be mean, but that's ridiculous. Then Tamara leans in. She apologizes, which she should not be apologizing at all because, like, Pacey is clearly a dick, clearly in the wrong, should not be apologizing. Fuck Pacey. Then she says, you're wrong about one thing. You're not a boy. And then she moves in and starts kissing him. Tamara, no, absolutely not. What are you doing? You should not be doing any of this. This is like a clear and present felony. And also, he called you old. Why are you doing this, Miss Jacobs? Get some self-respect. Not okay. All right, guys, so we're almost there. We're coming to the close. Now we got Dawson and Joey's response. Joey's in the closet. She's rolling around with an E.T. doll, very upset. Dawson doesn't understand what's going on, tries to have a conversation with her, and Dawson's response is ridiculous. He said, I'm sorry I'm such an insensitive male. I thought I was above it. I don't want to lose you, Joey. What we have is the thing that makes sense to me. When I saw you in the movie theater today with the lipstick on, I remember thinking how pretty you looked. I mean, I ignored it, but I thought it. Okay, you saw her in a bikini top earlier. The lipstick is what put you over the line, dude? You didn't notice anything else before that? Just the lipstick? That's a weird one. Joey responds with, when I saw you going for Jen's hand, it was not like I wanted to be the one holding your hand. I just didn't want her to hold your hand. So Dawson asks, where do they stand? And she says, we're growing up, Dawson. I mean, even Spielberg grew out of his Peter Pan syndrome. So yet again, we got another Spielberg reference. We got another reference to aging. They're obviously uncomfortable. She says flat out, I can't sleep over anymore. And we can't talk to each other like we used to because we're growing up. And Dawson says, no, that's just not true, Joey. I can tell you anything. And she says, yeah? How often do you walk the dog? And this is when I'm like, what the fuck? Walk the dog? okay. She says, you know what I mean? What time of day? How many times a week? And he's like, I can't, I won't. She then goes out the window, a la Billy from Scream style, and now she jumps in her rowboat. And this is when Dawson looks out the window, and he says, usually in the morning with Katie Couric. His mom's a news anchor, dude. First of all, you're jerking off to Katie Couric, and you're also jerking off to a news anchor in the morning before school? Gross, dude. Gross. She looks up from her boat, and she's really excited to see him and smirks, and that's the finale. Okay, so here we go. Here's our development from today. Okay, we got Jen's from New York and has problems. Her grandma's too religious, and she doesn't like it. We got Joey, clearly has feelings for Dawson, doesn't know how to handle herself. We got Pacey, helping Tamara commit a felony, and obviously has no respect for women whatsoever. We'll see if that's an ongoing theme. And Joey and Pacey obviously don't get along, so I'm assuming at some point they're probably going to end up together. I don't know for sure. And then we got Dawson, who's just asexual and does not understand a fucking thing about anything. That's pretty much the whole episode. So we got our first episode down of Dawson's Crack. So there we go. Pilot's done. Episode 0's done. Now we're going to do episode 2 as our episode 1. Thanks for everything. If you made it, great. If you didn't, I'm sorry. We'll do it all over again next time.